working to connect a region of over 600 cultural bridges between our lands.
Hello and welcome to ASEAN in Focus. I'm Maricar Velasco delivering to you the latest news in and around the ASEAN region. On today's headlines, President Rodrigo Duterte is slated to meet with King Abdullah II during his official visit to Jordan from September 2 to 5. This according to the Philippines Department of Foreign Affairs. A major effort was underway to reach thousands of people trapped in their homes after a dam swollen by monsoon rain overflowed early Wednesday in central Myanmar. Nobel laureate Aung San Suu Kyi should have resigned as Myanmar's de facto leader over last year's brutal army campaign against the Rohingya. This according to the outgoing UN human rights chief. President Rodrigo Duterte is slated to meet with King Abdullah II during his official visit to Jordan from September 2 to 5. This is according to the Philippines Department of Foreign Affairs. The DFA says the visit will renew the Philippines' ties with Jordan as the chief executive will hold discussions on broadening cooperation in key areas to advance shared aspirations for greater peace, progress, and prosperity. President Duterte will also meet with members of the Filipino community in Jordan in line with the Duterte administration's thrust of empowering Filipino overseas and enhancing their well-being. In Israel, the president is expected to sign agreements with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on areas of cooperation including labor, science, and investment. Meanwhile, there will also be a defense cooperation and memorandum of understanding for the two-way trade and investment between the two countries.
Now, both these visits will be a huge leap in the Philippines' bilateral partnerships with both countries after decades of diplomatic relations. Today, we are to build on these relationships, and our nations have much to gain from deepening ties, enhancing economic cooperation, sharing expertise in science and agriculture.
Field of science, agriculture, industry, and counter-terrorist. The president's supposed visit to Jordan and Israel will be the first visit of a Philippine leader to both Middle Eastern countries. A major effort was underway to reach thousands of people trapped in their homes after a dam swollen by monsoon rain overflowed early Wednesday in central Myanmar. A surge of water inundated the rural flatland in Bago region after the Swar Chang Dam spillway, which regulates the release of water, collapsed due to heavy seasonal rain. Some people waded out through chest-deep water to get to higher ground, while others crammed onto trucks and tractors to reach safety. Many others remain trapped in their half-submerged homes as soldiers, police, firefighters, and volunteers worked into the night to try to ferry residents out. Kin Myint, one of the flood victims, described the terrifying moment when the wave of water hit. Watch this. The Ministry of Social Welfare Director Phiu Lai Lai Tun said that no casualties have yet been reported, but more than 12,600 people have taken shelter in about 30 temporary camps. There are more than 14,000 households and some 63,000 people affected by the waters. The torrent also fractured part of a bridge on the Yangon-Mandalay Highway linking Myanmar's two biggest cities. Meanwhile, the Deputy Minister for Construction, Kiao Lin, said the bridge's supporting towers were sinking.
Jacob Lupu, Omashi, Skawari, Lupuaro, Yichaba Lushino, Yego Tomari Korava, single Giro, Chini Jiba.
In connection to this, rescuers in boats negotiated muddy waters on Thursday to reach thousands stranded in central Myanmar after the dam overflow, sending a torrent of water across farmlands and villages. Although no casualties have yet been reported, the state media said more than 63,000 people in Bago region were affected after the Swarchang Dam overflowed early Wednesday morning. It is the second major flood caused by damage to dam in weeks in the region, after at least 35 people were killed, scores left missing, and thousands displaced by a collapsed hydropower facility in neighboring Laos. There were soldiers sporting orange life jackets employed to rescue the stranded, steering tin boats to waiting villagers huddled on mudflats. Trucks were lodged in murky waters while roads had buckled under the weight of the water, which continued to flow across the villages. Reeling from the loss of his home, Wailin Ong said there was no warning from authorities on what to do after the dam overflowed. Take a look. In another top story, Nobel laureate Aung San Suu Kyi should have resigned as Myanmar's de facto leader over last year's brutal army campaign against the Rohingya. This statement made by the outgoing UN human rights chief. A military crackdown in response to attacks by Rohingya militants drove around 700,000 of Muslim minority from Rakhine State into Bangladesh, where they have been given accounts of widespread rape, murder, and arson targeting their villages. Suu Kyi, once branded as a defender of human rights, has been denounced outside her country for failing to speak up for the Rohingya or condemn the actions of Myanmar's army. Instead, as streams of desperate Rohingya fled, Suu Kyi suggested an iceberg of misinformation had obscured the real picture of what had taken place inside Rakhine and backed the army campaign as a justified response to terrorist attacks. UN Rights Chief UN Rights Chief Ziad Rad Al Hussein said there was no need for Suu Kyi to be the spokesperson of the Burmese military and that Suu Kyi didn't have to say this was an iceberg of misinformation. His stinging comments intensify days of negative criticism of Myanmar and its civilian and military leaders from the United Nations.
Nevertheless, we are concerned.
Meanwhile, Indonesian police say they shot Dedi Sukma after the accused motorcycle thief tried to wrestle away of an officer's pistol. But Sukma's family doesn't buy that account and is fighting for straight answers about why the 33-year-old died in a Jakarta slum just a month before host Indonesia kicked off the Asian Games. Sukma was one of the dozens of suspected petty thieves who have been killed by police in a crime crackdown ahead of the Regional Olympics, which started August 18 and ends on Sunday. However, his family, who insists Sukma was innocent, say the man's body showed signs of torture, including cigarette burns and the bloody outline of handcuffs marks on his wrists. Rights groups have slammed what they call a shoot first and ask questions later police operation in host city Jakarta and South Sumatra in the lead up to the Games, which draws some 11,000 athletes from 45 nations. According to Amnesty International, thousands of street crimes suspects have been arrested in recent months and nearly 80 have been shot dead nationwide since January. Over 30 deadly shootings happened as police ramped up their crackdown before the Games kicked off. The executive director of Amnesty's Indonesia office, Usman Hamid, said these shocking figures reveal a clear pattern of unnecessary use of force or excessive use of firearms committed by the police. Watch this.
These shocking figures for us reveal a clear pattern of unnecessary use of force or excessive use of firearms committed by the police. So this is also a constant veil of impunity that taints a public security institution like the police. Hosting an international multi-sport event must not come at the price of abandoning human rights, which is already declining in Indonesia.
Visiting the Philippines, Manila or Quezon City is a popular destination. But oftentimes the hustle and bustle of the city can be more stressful on your vacation. So when you feel the need to reconnect to nature or relax again, there's a beautiful oasis just outside of the city called the Garden at Ciudad de Victoria. That you can see here include hydrangea, snapdragon, and stargazers. They're truly beautiful. The gardens at Ciudad de Victoria are so peaceful, tranquil, and beautiful that it's become a haven for young couples and a very popular venue for engagement photos. The next time you want an escape from the big city, the garden at Ciudad de Victoria is a wonderful place to visit.
Welcome back. Asia struggled on Thursday to ride the wave of optimism that swept Wall Street to another record close, with investors taking a breath after a strong week across most markets. New York's indexes powered ahead as news that Canada and the United States were close to a fresh trade deal that would revive NAFTA coincided with better than expected U.S. growth and a possible breakthrough in Brexit talks. The pound and euro were also holding up after surging after the European Union's top negotiator said it was open to a unique deal with Britain, which raised hopes that the country will leave with a working relationship with the bloc. For most of this year, world markets have been under pressure as China and the U.S. have threatened and imposed tit-for-tat tariffs that fueled fears of a global trade war, while Washington has also picked fights with allies including the EU, Canada, and Mexico. However, optimism has picked up recently. On Monday, Donald Trump and his Mexican counterpart Enrique Peña Nieto announced a new trade agreement, which was followed Wednesday by news that Canada was close to a deal fueling hopes for a NAFTA 2.0. Trump and Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau expressed optimism a deal is close, and the White House plans to notify Congress on Friday of its intention to enter into a new free trade agreement. Talks on a China-backed free trade pact have reached a critical stage, Singapore's leader said Wednesday as he urged regional economic ministers to seal the deal by the end of the year. The 16-nation regional comprehensive economic partnership, which will be the world's biggest free trade accord if it is agreed, has taken center stage as Washington embarks on a unilateral protectionist agenda. Covering about half the world's population, the RCEP notably excludes the U.S., which had been leading another regional pact, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, until President Donald Trump abandoned it on coming to office early last year. Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong said the RCEP negotiations have continued for some time and have now reached a critical stage. The possibility of substantively concluding the RCEP negotiations is finally in sight after a great deal of work. The Singapore meeting will be joined later in the week by top trade officials from ASEAN's main trading partners, including China, Japan, Australia, and the United States. Lee also warned about escalating tensions between the U.S. and China, who have been locked in a spiraling trade row, and other major economies, including the Eurozone and Canada. The RCEP will be an important signal to the world that ASEAN members and our partners place high value on free trade, regional integration, and international cooperation, he said. The pact will group the 10 ASEAN members plus China, India, Japan, South Korea, Australia, and New Zealand, and will cover a third of the world's gross domestic product. A diplomatic source said Singapore, this year's ASEAN chair, is pushing for an agreement on the RCEP before handing over the chairmanship to Thailand in 2019. Another source involved in the talk said ASEAN leaders hope to announce the substantial conclusions of negotiations during a summit in November with their main trading partners, and they expect the pact to be implemented in 2020. Beijing is keen to use Washington's rejection of the TPP to build enthusiasm for its own deal and increase influence in the region. RCEP is a more modest deal that prescribes lower and more limited regulatory standards. The 11 remaining TPP members signed a slimmed-down version of the agreement in March. The United States and Japan are still the main investors in top Southeast Asian industries, while China is eyeing smaller markets and niche sectors. This statement is according to HSBC economist team report as reported by the Singapore-based The Business Times. The report said foreign direct investment inflows in the region are back to where they were before the Asian financial crisis of 1997, and the trend could persist in the near to medium term. However, they still warned that risk may outweigh the benefits in the near term, giving ongoing trade tensions globally, even though it is also true that the region may benefit if companies decide to shift all factors of production to ASEAN to avoid China-specific tariffs. The HSBC team noted that the FDI boom in ASEAN has not been felt equally, with Vietnam, Malaysia, and Singapore the key beneficiaries, with the Philippines and Indonesia lagging, while Thailand has faced net FDI outflows for 2 years.
sabi, hilo-hilo na ako sa kanya.
Ano po bang relevance ng mga dam? Yung mga napapanood ako sa Hollywood, yung mga sumasabog na dam.
Gong, maraming salamat. Malaking tulong ito mula sa Ilocos hanggang sa NCR, Marikina, Tumanan.
First time nyo bang gamitin yung mga modular tents na yun?
I touched it. I touched the ball before it went out, Coach. Come on, Alex. The ref did not call that. You gotta be kidding me, Alex. It's the championship game. Talk to him, Coach. I touched it. It's their ball. Come on and do it right. Don't foul them when they inbound. Team on 3. 1, 2, 3. Nice going, Alex. Sorry, Coach. Alex. Alex. Good call.
Sportsmanship. Pass it on.
Right. I touched the man.
Welcome back. Indonesia's Hendro said it was a miracle to even finish the 50-kilometer race walk in Jakarta's brutal pollution, heat, and humidity after he was carried from the finish line on a stretcher. Hendro collapsed after pounding the Indonesian's capital's smoggy street for more than 4.5 hours in 31 Celsius heat to finish last in the Asian Games' slowest 50-kilometer walk for nearly 3 decades. The air quality index in central Jakarta hit 163 on Thursday morning. A reading of more than 150 is considered a health threat to the general population. After being doused in ice water by medics, Hendro, 28, was carried to the medical center shouting with pain. Hendro says the race was so difficult with the hot weather, humidity, and the pollution, making it very difficult to race in the country, adding it was a miracle for him to even finish. Hayato Katsuki of Japan took gold with 23 minutes slower than the last Asian Games with a well-judged race after making holes in his vest to improve ventilation. Fellow Japanese Satoshi Maruo set the pace for much of the way, but fell back in the final 10 kilometers, ending 10 minutes behind the winner and out of the medals. China's Wang Kim took silver and Ju Hyun Myung of South Korea bronze. Meanwhile, Malaysia celebrates its National Day as Malaysian Armed Forces personnel march during a parade in Putrajayawa. The video shows Malaysia's King Sultan Muhammad V saluting soldiers as the national anthem is played. The Malaysian uniformed flag bearers, Fire Department of officers marched in National Day parade down the main streets of the country's administrative capital of Putrajayawa. And that is the latest news in the Southeast Asian nations. Stay updated about the ASEAN region. I'm Maricar Velasco and I'm 1 with 25.